Welcome, ghouls, ghoulettes, and guesties to GonstFM Off Air, the official podcast companion to 66.6 GonstFM, the internet radio station dedicated to the band Ghost and the wider Gonst community. I'm Papa X.
And I'm Uncle Ghoul.
And our Masks of the Evil Ones podcast episode series continues on with the Impera Era. No, we didn't rhyme that on purpose, motherfucker. That's just how it came out. Impera Era.
Yeah, it's really funny. When this era started, I was joking to myself, like, how am I going to say that? Because it sounds Impera Era. I was like, dude, it's the cycle. Like, I had a crisis over that when I heard that it was called Impera, because I was like, can I say Impera Era?
yeah. Impera Era. It rolls off the tongue easier than you think it does.
It does. Yeah, it does.
So where we last left off in our pre-Kel era, see, that it sounds cooler, right?
Yeah.
But like Impera Era,
does.
we're here. So
Impera Era.
Impera Era error. That's
error.
Yeah. So we last left off during the pre-Kel era at the final gig named Death, where Cardinal Copia finally ascends to Papa Emeritus IV status. And we kind of got into the mask there, but we're going to dive full into the masks all through this era here, and along with the extremely overhauled Nameless Ghouls. So where do we start? Mexico, literally right where we leave off. So this mask, it's essentially just Cardinal Copia's mask, like sideburns, mustache, the whole nine, with a Papa IV paint, but this isn't the Papa IV that most people probably know. This has like a different nose, literally a different nose, and nose paint. It's more of a rat skull. Like they actually went more for a rat skull kind of paint job on this.
Yeah. It was a great moment, and we see it for the first time. And there's something interesting. There's a lot of differences, with this mask to what we would see later on. But it's much more, for me, in my opinion, kind of traditional to what we expect from Papa from the past, as opposed to some of the choices that they made later on when we talk about the second mask that came after this. But this mask is interesting because it is just, like you said, the Cardinal Copia mask. It's, as far as I'm aware, it's the same one. From the same mold, at least, anyways. But and it's still a Jerry Constantine mask, and it has this white and black skull face paint, like a rat. And it has these slits down the nose. The mustache is still there, not painted or anything, or like removed. Past, we had Papa II, who wore a mustache, had a mustache technically, but in this case, his mustache is a part of the face paint, kind of. It's just there. His big long sideburns, and it's a great look. With the face paint, just the white ends at his chin. It's really cool.
If people out there would like to get like a really good look at this mask, because I know like we'll be posting a lot of what we speak about on our Instagram page at GonstFM. So if you want to take a look at any of the Papas we're speaking about, we make big posts with a lot of photos referencing specific masks. Like Papa 1 and 2 are on there, Papa 3 coming soon. But if you want to get a good look at the mask we're talking about right now before that post goes up, I think one of the best shots of this is the Rolling Stones cover that Papa IV does with the helicopters, because he's in that mask.
And he's in that mask for this, and that's a really great look of it. There's also great footage of that show. So this is an interesting thing. I put this down in my notes. I couldn't tell if the one for the Rolling Stones one is the exact same mask or if it's slightly different, because the hair looks a little bit longer and the mustache looks a little bit longer. But I'm not sure if that's an edit on the mask itself, just been rehauled, or if it's a different one. But regardless, it's the exact same style, which shows that that was the final design that they were going for a little bit. But it is kind of interesting that once he gets to that appearance, it looks like the mustache is a little bit longer, going down a little bit past the black, which just adds to the kind of coolness of it. But you can get a really great look at that rat skull face paint, especially. Yeah. And that sculpt and how it's so clearly Cardinal Copia. You know what I mean? Like, it's so clearly like recognizable as the Cardinal. Still, it's that mask, because we had gotten used to that mask for so long, and it's that mask, as opposed to, we'll talk about, it gets resculpted. He gets some plastic surgery. But there's also another good resource to look at is the profile picture they had for a while there of just him backstage, that Ryan Chang photo from Mexico City, where he's in the full robes in the meet and greet room. And that shot is phenomenal. And that really sold that mask for me, was that shot. And also just the proportions are beautiful. Seeing him in that blue chasuble without the cope. I've gone on record saying that that's one of my favorite looks for Papa.
Like you're talking about the almost poncho-esque kind of look to it,
yes,
right?
Yeah. There's something about it to where it's so mobile. To me, it's almost a criminal that later on, spoiler, later on in the cycle, he doesn't wear that. He wears it, but he wears, it's a clerical thing, I believe, called a cope over it.
Yeah.
And it's basically a black cape. And he does wear that in Mexico City, but he also takes it off. And I believe the kind of original idea was that he was, as opposed to, on Imperator, he switched to the, what he wore for Year Zero with the cornet, that fit. I believe the original idea was that he would have layers. Instead of having something like that, he would just switch to just the chasuble or the poncho chasuble for those more stripped down moments. And that would be like multiple outfits in one. So the layers could make it appear as different, vestments while staying in the same one. But it's a great design that's so incredibly mobile, but also looks like, the traditional Papa look. He looks like a priest or a pope, wearing that Catholic kind of vestment with all those beautiful symbols and sigils on it. And that mask looks so great. All of that combined is like, it really sold the moment of, we have a Papa again, not just a cardinal. This is Papa,
Yeah. And also talking about the vestments, I think one of the more obvious things to point out would be, and obviously we're going to go through, much of the costuming and more of the masks as it develops, because this Papa mask develops quite a few times over the course of the next couple of years in this era, right? So the biggest change is the new crucifix that is emblazed on all this stuff, right? It's got a huge, very line heavy, G, and then it's not so much of an upside down. It is an upside down cross still, but it's a little more refined. It's really gaudy.
It's not as simplistic and classic. It's a reinvention.
Yeah, I mean, and Zbigniew Imbilik did this. He designed this look, and I mean, it shows. Like, he's been doing their artwork for years, and I love that. The more we've gone through each era, the more intricate some of this stuff becomes.
And these robes, interestingly, too, and these vestments take a. If you get really nerdy with it, they take a kind of detour from how things had been done before, specifically where we've had this kind of similar design for all three Papas, being that it's a chasuble, right? Which, for those of you out there who are listening, and don't know, a chasuble, when I use that term, is what popes wear. It's that poncho-looking thing that anyone like a pope, a priest or anyone, a vestment, right, for the Catholic Church will wear. So that specific thing that Papa 1, 2, and 3 wear, where, their arms are outstretched and it's this big flowing vestment, is called a chasuble. And then, the hat is a mitre. So his chasuble kind of doesn't follow the pattern and cut of the usual ones. It is specifically much more of, like you said, a poncho, as opposed to being, a big, full arm's length thing. So it's designed in a way where, he was falling a lot, as we mentioned in the Papa 3 one, and he hurt himself a lot. And he mentioned he got hurt pretty bad a couple of times from it. It's not practical to move on stage. So these are designed in a way, it's really interesting, to where it's like, yes, he's wearing a chasuble, but it's much more of a kind of priest chasuble as opposed to like the full Catholic vestment one, specifically for that reason. And it's the first time we're seeing a lot of layers, right? He has this kind of leather cope that goes over it, and it has layers to that, and then it has these clasps with a stole, and he has, the mitre no longer has the traditional panels, right? Where if you look at the first three Papa's mitres, there's this panel that kind of forms almost a cross, but with, on it, where there's one band going around the center and then one up the top of it, and the crucifix lays in that on all three of them. This does not have that. Instead, it has kind of, it has a band structure that is kind of this weird pattern of just lines going everywhere with the crucifix, this new crucifix in the center, and then a cross on the back of it, and it's covered in jewels. So like you said, between Majesty Black and Go-Go's and all the other artists who worked with this, it's classic Ghost, but it's also a very big departure, because this is not just, a chasuble and mitre and that's the vestment. There's other elements to this now, and it has layers and parts, and it doesn't really flow in the way. His shape is different, where they're much more flowing big figures. This is much more form-fitting, body tight with the cope and everything. It just looks like it fits him much tighter and it almost gives more of like an evil emperor vibe as opposed to like a, you know, flowing pope and like big flowy robes, you know?
Yeah, because I want to say, you know, as goofy as this character is and got, the first few shots of Papa 4 in all of his getup, he looks evil as shit. There's some shots of him where I'm like, God, he's fucking frightening looking in a few, like, it's the lighting, like how he looks imposing, even though this dude is like a fucking dancing gummy bear sometimes. And I say that with all the love in the world. It was nice to see shots of him where he looks intimidating. I think that might be a better word to describe him. He's very intimidating looking, especially with the Majesty black gloves with the bones on the tops of the hands. This may be one of the most intricate but well put together designs of any of the Papas, really. And I'm saying that as somebody that really, really likes the way that Papa 3's vestments looked, and even Cardinal Copia, as simple as it was, I really enjoyed what that was, but I love the immense amount of detail in this entire getup.
Yeah, I mean, they fit perfectly with the kind of where they're going with this era, and it walks a line perfectly between what you want from Papa, right? You want it to be intimidating, sacrilegious, and scary, and kind of a little dark and a little comical, but you also want it to be fit for arenas, right? And one thing we haven't really talked about is that these vestments shine under stage lights.
Yes.
They're covered in crystals and rubies and all types of emeralds and diamonds and, you know, jewels. If you've anyone who's, you know, listening who has been to a ritual in the store, you know that it blinds you pretty much in person. This is a gaudy, and not even in a negative way, but it is a, you know, meant to be on stage. And the, you know, he comes out on stage midway through the shows later on in this outfit,
right?
And the entire arena always erupts.
Yeah, and we are speaking directly to, and I'm very aware of this, as I'm sure you are, Anthony. Like, most of our listeners did come in during this era. And so when we speak to those of you that have been to pre-Imperator, Imperator, or re-Imperator, or if you've gone to all of them, you know exactly what we're talking about. And this dude is like a fucking ghoulish disco ball. Like, for real. Like, just hang him and spin him around. Yeah, just hang him up and...
Disco ball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Gisco. Hang him and spin him around, man. Let him fly. Put him on some, you know, wires and, like, sling him around and shit. I'm sure he would have gone for it.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's like, he was like Peter Pan, he's like the most evil fucking Peter Pan ever. But I love the coloring. And that's another thing that I think makes this translate really well. The blues, like, this is royal blue, gold, black. It's a fucking sleek look.
There's something about seeing him come out at that Mexico City show, right? And they go into Conclave con Dio, and it's just it's this thing of, like, you know, we talked about last week. We come from just this black cassock, pretty much, you know, as his vestments when he's a cardinal, to the most ornate robes, and it almost says something about his character, because at the time there was a lot of talk about him being insecure and not sure if he was up to being Papa or if he was rightfully able to be Papa, you know, and all these things. And so it kind of is like he's overcompensating with this, you know, the costume has to be the Papa robes, you know. He's not just a Papa, but these are the most beautiful, you know, for the insecurities. It's you know, it's like Batman, you know, you put on the suit to become what you want to be, you know, and it's that type of thing of, like, it's if you could imagine the previous robes, but blown up for arena size stages, that's what it is. It's just over the top designer, you know, bling everywhere.
But I like how it evolves, because he's got, okay, so, you know, not jumping too far, I guess it's not even really too far. It's within a couple of years. So, like,
well, yeah, because they disappear for a while.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. So we kind of, you know, we lose Ghost in a way because their plans are curtailed by the pandemic, like where we're all locked down for a while, and, you know, concerts were suspended pretty much indefinitely. And by the time we got around to having the tour, you know, kickoff for Impera, when Impera came out, which, you know, we've reviewed on this podcast. So if you haven't checked that series out, it's an album review series that we did, The Road to Skeletor. So check those out and you'll hear our thoughts on Impera as an album. But when this tour starts with pre-Imperator, we've already gotten used to the way that he was debuted, but then we're getting something different. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing is like between this,
we had 2 years of getting used to the other mask.
Yeah, between this and the chapters videos, like we're getting like a ton of different shit. And I think that's where it kind of gets to people that are not like paying attention to like timeline wise where like certain things happen. I think it might be easier to lose your spot, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Like it might be easier for it to become convoluted in a way for a more casual person.
I think also, you know, for a lot of people, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of our viewers found Ghost through Mariana Cross blowing up on TikTok. A lot of people found Ghost through that, right? Later in 2022. So for a lot of people, the version of Copia or Papa 4 that people are most familiar with is the one from Imperator, Re-Imperator, Pre-Imperator, and not so much the one that we just talked about, right? This Jerry Constantine mask and those robes. And so most people, I think, know about that, obviously. But I don't know if everyone had the opportunity to have... Well, let me put it this way, right? You have 2 years of lockdown, essentially, right? From 2020 to 2022. 2 years of lockdown of, if you want Ghost content, all you have that's like to get you pumped and get you through that pandemic, for a lot of us, myself included, was just rewatching the videos from that Mexico City concert. And on top of that, it felt like every other week, Ghost released a t-shirt design with that mask design on it. So you got really used to it. There's everything from plushies with that face paint with the rat nose to a paint your own Papa figure to tons of t-shirts. Yep. Like Richie's wearing one right now. I don't know if I am right now. No, I'm not. There's so many t-shirts. There's almost as many t-shirts with that design as there are without it, because they released a bundle once that was like, there was a COVID mask they released that had it. Like they were pumping out merch with that design. And, every week there was like a 4-pack of t-shirts that would go up with that, design. As a fandom, we got really used to that face paint. And then, rumblings were happening with a tour, and the Ticketmaster photo went up. It leaked a couple days before on Ticketmaster, a photo of, it's just now the iconic photo of him in the Gold Hall in Swedish Stockholm City Hall, behind the mural of the Stockholm bloodbath.
That's one of my favorite shots.
It is too. Mine too.
So good.
I'm so glad that when we did meet and greet that year, that was the shot that he signed. And that was just like, I was like so happy because I was like, that's such a badass shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a, and the mask comes across as very different here, right? And it just kind of was a kind of discussion over the fandom. It's like, okay, it's changed, which normally, like we talked before, we've had changes with masks before, Papa 3 changed pretty dramatically, but it was in the span of like 2 weeks. You didn't have 2 years to get used to the mask before. So for some people, getting used to this one that everyone, I think most people out there listening to, my point being, are used to, some of us, myself included, it was really hard to get used to that new one once we get to that start of that tour.
Not even just the mask, but holy shit, the legitimate amount of like costume variations that come along with these masks. There's a whole, and again, this might be a little, not back and forth, but we may jump to and from certain suits because
there's so much to talk about.
There's a lot. Like, I think one of the more iconic looks that it only lasted a short amount of time was the military look from Kaiserian.
It's so funny to think about that. It wasn't that long because I feel like it was so long. But when you're right, when I think back on it, it didn't really last that long. But it was so impactful that it feels like it was there for so long.
Right.
That opening night happens in Reno, and we get so many amazing costumes. And, it's interesting. They wear them for different songs than the actual tour because you can see him wearing it for Mummy Dust, with that military jacket. I saw someone at the time call it Welcome to the Rat Parade. And I haven't stopped thinking about that. But it's amazing. It's a beautiful.
It's Gerard Way on stage,
which is really funny because not to get too off topic, but anyone ever out knows Cardinal Copia looks exactly like the patient from the Black Parade video.
Yes,
like down to the mustache and the black eye paint, and it's dead on. So it's really funny. There's another little connection between theatrical rock bands like that of the 20th century, but.
You see,
Anyways,
when Copia was a young boy, his papa took him into the city to see the marching band.
And that's how he joined the ministry.
That's right.
But for real though, that costume is beautiful, right? Like it is. There's so much that I feel like people talk about this costume so much, but don't talk about like the intricacies of it that are so cool. Like the fact that waistcoat is the designs from his robe, the designs from his chasuble, so it continues on, the embroidery that's on his robes to his casual suit, which is something that we talked about before, is like kind of a trend that goes forward, is that Cardinal had the kind of dressed down version of his robes, where he had the red suit to go with the red cassock and the black suit to go in the same designs. This is that same type of thing where the designs on that waistcoat he wears under that military jacket are the same ones as his robes, and it kind of continues that through line there, which is a great design choice. And then these pants, these distressed pants that looks so sick with this lace up, crotch, and yep, and it's everyone's obsessed with these pants, and they're distressed and they're all destroyed.
See, I call them his Shreddy Krugers. That's what I call them.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. I love those. And then the jacket, it's this, the epaulets on the shoulder, the gold epaulets and the gold, it's distressed too. It looks like he came straight out of battle, which, is kind of what this era gives in, we're talking about the rise and fall of empires, is like, satanic soldiers coming out from a battle. And, not to jump, because we're jumping around for sure. But, he's flanked by these ghouls who look like military, outfits and everything. It's just, there's such a militaristic vibe to this era that's such a stark departure from the kind of religious priest garb that we're used to from Ghost. We talked last week about how, you can't change too much, but at the same time, a lot changes here to where the whole kind of vibe shifts from the kind of religious thing to something much more steampunk and, almost, it reminds me of Meliora in a way of where it's kind of this, futuristic, or not futuristic, 18th century kind of like, very, I don't know, like there's a lot of steampunk elements in Meliora's stuff and the futuristic cityscapes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it kind of feels like that here too.
It does kind of fit if you think in terms of like song content and shit like that. It goes from Metropolis, which is obviously like Meliora. That was very Metropolis influence with the city landscapes. And this is very much like wet England, Jack the Ripper.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which, are two very different aesthetics, but at the same time share some DNA, in this kind of dapper, dressed up type of feel. To it, and in this kind of vibe of elegance, but everything's rotting. And, even in the stage set and the costumes, everything's distressed and rotting this era.
The drums are
not to say that everything is gross. The drums are rust colored. The platforms are rusted, everywhere. It's like a rusted out cathedral, like a wasteland, after an empire has collapsed.
Oh, I love that shit.
And not, I hate to jump ahead, but like really jump ahead, but I'm so glad that one of my favorite hopes kind of came through, which is that, Skeletor, and the next era is the opposite. Everything's shiny and new. It's a new shiny cathedral while this is a crumbling one.
Right.
It's kind of a great juxtaposition in stage set and costume design. Everything here is, but that goes with the robes, right? Because gold is, kind of rust colored, and there's a lot of these kind of darker colors and blues and things. And so it kind of works really well visually altogether, is this kind of, an empire that's fallen.
Yeah. And it's wild because, he didn't stick with the military look. I think one of the only looks, quote unquote, looks from that was the Year Zero robe, how it kind of carried over the color scheme. But it's the only time he really goes into that look is like for that part of the show. Because he kind of goes from the military jacket to just a plain ass black jacket with the colored like neck sash,
and it has a kind of like a spine. It's not necessarily a spine, but it's a felt thing. It's the funny thing about that outfit is, and it can play into this, is it's really close to the ghouls. It's almost exact, down to that spine and everything. So it's kind of interesting. It's like you could view it as, being one of just nothing special. He's the same as the rest of them, the identical. It's just kind of like one of the guys, It's not this gaudy thing. It just goes into that, which also is a great look. And honestly is one of my favorite looks that he has. That jacket with it's a little distressed. It has some fringe and stuff, but it's a black jacket, and the pants and everything. But it looks so good in that the blue necktie, Sir Baker tie and everything. It looks phenomenal. And it's just a very, I don't know, it kind of gives me Papa 3 vibes, and not in a way to where it's the same at all, but seeing that kind of iconic face paint and that look, it works really well. It's kind of a classic Ghost vibe,
Yeah, and it makes his mask pop a lot more.
Yeah, and because we didn't talk about it really, that mask changed a lot, right?
Right.
So everything's different now. We have Immortal Mask making a mask by this point now, and it's a completely different sculpture, and so it works much better with these new costumes that he has. Andrew Freeman sculpted this new mask, and it was haired by the same people who worked with Jerry Constantine. It was Denise doing it again, and Damian Zimmerman did some paint job on that, and Santino Fariz. So there was a lot of people working on the mask, making this what it is. But we see a lot of variations of this too. But it's the nose paint is gone now, and it's a much larger, friendly looking mask with rounder eyes and clean paint, and the hair is really slicked back, and the chin is much larger, and everything is much larger looking about it in sculpture wise. And so it works really well with the black suit,
There's a few iterations during this cycle where there are slight differences with some of the masks where, like some of it's the eyes. You know what I mean? Like
I've identified 3 main masks that are there. The first one is the one that we use for a good majority of it. And around, I believe, the Texas date on Re-Imperator, they switch it to one that it's mainly the eyes, as you mentioned, right?
Yep.
The eyes go from being really rounded to being more angular, but it also gets weathered. Like by the time they came to the ritual I attended on that tour, Worcester, Mass on that tour, the paint was starting to turn gray, and it was smudging a little bit, and the eyes were much more angular and evil, like Papa 2. The paint was a little bit messier, and there's a couple smudges on some of the parts on it, and on a lot of them, the white goes all the way down the neck, which no Papa has done before. It goes all the way down the neck and kind of stops halfway. But that's kind of the main changes that you see until right here, right now, and the week before that, where we get we'll talk about it. A very strange looking mask to me, where the hairline gets much further up. They move the hairline back. The face paint is also done smaller. Like all of it, it's like they kind of shrunk the design on his face, but not the sculpture. So it looks like his face is a little bit smaller. And from some angle, the proportions are just kind of like, I have to imagine one might have been like damaged or something. And so this was a backup or something, because it's the paint is applied very clean and very nice, but it looks shrunk compared to how it looked a couple weeks before, and from some angles it looks really strange.
The hair, like, oh, dude, the hair lays weird. Like I'm saying this, it's kind of funny. Like if you really think about it in this manner, where it's like, how does Papa wake up today? Like, does he roll? Like you're just imagining this character, not even the guy under the mask, but you're imagining Papa 4 as a person, like a character. He just rolls off the bus. He touches his face paint up. Am I going to fix my hair today? Am I going to part it down the middle? Am I going to comb it? Am I going to slick it back like CM Punk style? Or am I going to just have some wild, like cryptid looking shit? Because let's be honest, man, some of the photos that we got from this tour were fucking hysterical. And I'm not even talking about like official.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about
the flopped ones where he flops his head forward and it moves all as one entity. Like,
it's the sentient hair follicles, man. Like,
it won't. Not to ruin this for anyone, but like one thing I've never understood design choice wise, maybe someone can explain it to me. The hair grows out of the face paint. Yes. Like if you look at the top of his forehead, the face paint goes past his hairline.
Yeah. And
that's like very impossible to do. Like it looks like he had face paint on and then his hair grew afterwards. Like he like rapid grew his hair. And I just don't know why they did that, because the one he had before, the Jerry Constantine mask, has, you can see, that's another detail I didn't mention, is the white of the face paint goes into his hairline, but it's like on his hair. Like he smudged it, like he put it on and it's just kind of like over the top of it.
Yeah.
But it's not on his hairline. It's like, and it cuts off at his jaw. Here, they also make the face paint go down his chin and kind of fade off and taper, which makes his chin look much bigger in certain lightings too. Because as opposed to having, when you do makeup, like I remember Kiss used to do this, they'd draw their new jawline. They'd have the white end at a certain point, so it looked like their faces were skinnier. He doesn't do this. The face paint comes all the way down his neck, which then makes his neck and his chin look much bigger.
Fucker got a launch pad on his face, dude.
Yeah, you get this crimson chin looking,
looking like Glass Joe from fucking Punch Out.
And it's just,
I love this. I love Papa 4.
I love Papa 4 too. It works so well for the comical vibe, but if we're talking about realism, it doesn't make the mark there.
Yeah, and another thing too is, hey man, is he going to be wrinkly today or is he going to be smooth like a baby's ass today?
Yeah, it really depends on the mask and the amount of weathering on that mask. And we also have another version of this mask, which is the one in the chapters where it's just flesh tone.
Yeah, because let's talk about that. So we go from Cardinal Copia, right, where exactly. We go from Cardinal Copia. He has the sideburns, he's got the mustache, and then he has the rat paint, right? So we go from that, and then we get the Papa 4 that we know with the clean shaven face, but with the face paint. Cool. There's a lot of us that, man, when he just rolls up in the ministry with no paint on. I mean, obviously he's got the eyeliner kicking. It's the first time we've seen Copia without the Papa 4 paint in quite some time. And it looks fucking weird. And I'm not even saying that in a mean way. It's just, it's so like, what the hell?
There's a lot of things. It's like, how do you approach this?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that, like, I'm trying to be delicate, that look... I'm just laughing because it's like how to approach. It's his lips, partially.
Yeah,
and it's just like they look phenomenal with the face paint. There's something very uncanny valley about seeing it without, to where that plastic surgery job that he got did not do any favors to his facial proportions. And then the more you see it, the more you look at it, the more unhuman he looks. If that makes sense. The more unhuman and just uncanny he looks, and the things that are wrong about it, not wrong per se, but are like different, stand out. You know what he looks like? He looks like if you went to a character artist and had them draw like himself and then like made that real.
Shit.
Like, and I don't even mean that to be mean. It's just a very stylized look.
Right.
But it's very hard to do skin tone and all that stuff in a way that looks convincing, and this doesn't do that ever. And so he shows up at one point in the tracksuit, and it's just kind of a jump scare.
Dude,
it's just like,
I love this look for so many fucking reasons, and that's one of them where, like, we talked about how
hilarious.
Yeah, we talked about how when he first shows up in chapter 1 as Cardinal Copia before any of this happens, where it's like, oh man, like they have to lean into the camp a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. This is the part of Ghost's story where he's like, you know what? Fuck it, and goes balls deep into the camp. And this could not be more apparent than the Hollywood audition tape, because he's in full effect here. Let's be real.
Yeah. I don't. There's something inherently funny about how he looks, and like that's not at all to insult any of the artists who worked on this. The work is beautiful. We're just saying that, like, compared to how he looked before when he was Cardinal to now, it's a botched plastic surgery job, and it adds to the comedicness in a beautiful way.
That's probably the best way I like.
You know what I mean?
It.
Like it's one of those things where it's just like, of course the Cardinal would have a botched plastic surgery job. Like, of course that he would be like pay someone under the table to do it, like, before getting into, it's like,
bro, we should do a fucking tier list of like the plastic surgeries that him and Sister Imperator had. Like, who had it?
Yes, I'd be so down.
If you want to see Papa X and Uncle Ghoul do a tier list of botched plastic surgery on Copia and Sister Imperator, please leave a comment down below.
We can, I'll be the first comment on that.
All right, cool.
But enough dogging on the
Sure.
kind of surgery.
It's all in good fucking fun, man. Like
it is.
I come from a if you love something, you kind of roast it in lighthearted manner for
And I don't wish for it to be different. It's just one of those things where it's like you get used to that one look for so long that it's like, I think it's something too. Like we were talking before, it's like, most people who are viewing this, that's the only version that they know the most,
right?
Because they got used to seeing him like that, becoming a fan during that cycle. But when you have, 5 years of getting used to that other version, all those little changes feel, it's like, when they bring back a movie, and they recreate a character or something like a Star Wars or whatever, and there's just something a little bit different because it's resculpted or remade, it becomes more apparent, and it's just like, oh, that's a little different. It's like when Michael Myers comes back and the mask is a little different every time, and it's like some of them, look really great. Some of them are just like, huh, that looks like I remember, but also not. And so there's something kind of uncanny about it. It's like, yeah, that's close. What I remember, but was that wrinkle always there? It's like,
dude, there's a ton of little differences that if you want to get like out there, anybody listening, if you want to get magnifying glass about, you definitely can with this particular pop-up.
Well, yeah, it also, it's one of those things where it's like, it looks nothing like he looked before. Like whatever that surgery was a complete like skull reconstruction. Because his jaw is completely different. His face is completely different in the way that it sits. His nose is completely different. It's really bulbous and round. It's no longer that square nose he had before. His eyes are a little more sunken in his forehead. His face is wider. His hair is different. His neck is different in the way it sits. It's not as forward on his face. His like jaw, it goes backwards. It's all different.
Right. I do want to say this, like, not to cut you off, but I do want to say this because I know somebody out there or multiple people out there listening are going to like be probably cussing under their breath at, us for saying at least, but we know why, ergonomically speaking, why the mask had to change. And it's because Tobias has extreme claustrophobia and, being under a mask like that for years, you need to make necessary changes in order to alleviate that fear. So obviously when we get into Perpetua era, like there's a reasoning behind how he's dressed now. But with this, there were a lot of changes made for this reason in particular. So yes, we are very well aware of that, just in case somebody out there is like, yeah, fuck you guys, because I'm pretty sure.
Respect it. And, any criticism that there is or anything that sounds less than positive has, again, no respect, or disrespect to anyone who worked on it or did a great job, because it's beautiful work. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's different.
Absolutely.
It's not bad. It's just different than what you're used to. No Papa before had a mask. The company changed mid-cycle, basically, with a completely different look. So when you talk about it and you get used to one version, it's like when they redesigned Barney. You know what I mean? Like, have you seen that? The new, people, some people love it, some people don't. But it's one of those things where it's like, it's different. It's never going to be the same that you love. No. It's like things change sometimes,
No.
Which is a really big message of the cycle. But, there are also times, as much as, we talked about how goofy sometimes it can look, it can also look amazing and can look like one of the best masks that's ever been used from this band. There are so many shots, like even not to jump ahead, but right here, right now, the scene where he's on the couch, it looks phenomenal. Or the scene, it looks so ominous when he's sitting at his desk. He's got the or his his mirror, and it's dark and it's grungy, and it looks so it looks beautiful. Or whenever he comes out in the full robes for Conclave Candio, it's it's a beautiful look.
The mask could not have been more well shown off than it was in Right Here, Right Now, honestly. Several zoom-in shots in particular of this mask where the lighting, the angle, everything about it is just like, I'm punching my fist, like, fuck yeah,
and
it's
it
so
moves.
good.
He can emote in it. Like his eyebrows, you can see, especially when it's like Frater in like the chapter 17, I think, his eyebrows can move, because it's so well-fitting. It's if anyone from Immortal Mask is listening, hats off to you. George and Andrew, everyone who's working on that, phenomenal job. It's beautiful. But it's funny, there's so much to talk about in this era, and we haven't even touched the Ghouls some of the other costumes and things, the sparkly jacket. There's so much.
I was going to say, we haven't even touched on all of Papa's fucking costumes yet. Still.
Yeah, like,
and we're probably like fucking 40 something minutes into this podcast.
Yeah.
And we're, so we have like we talked about the military. We talked about the Year Zero robe. We talked about his debut robe, and we talked about what it looks like with the mitre and everything on. We haven't really jumped into his different colored Sir Tom Baker jackets that he wears throughout the show, up to and including the Encore jacket, the famous Encore jacket.
Interesting, because like this is our kind of first time seeing, to a degree, since the first cycle. Objectively, you could look at this as they are store-bought jackets, off the shelf, non-custom pieces, which is kind of interesting, right? Because we talk so much about this cycle being, they are designer, custom made to him and everything, but you can buy these jackets from Sir Tom Baker, some of them I think are custom colors, but majority of them you can buy, and they're pre-existing models. And that's interesting because it kind of reminds me of, the Papa one, the ghouls being, Halloween costumes, but just like the much more higher end version of that same type of, idea there. But there's kind of an accessibility to that,
Right.
They always reminded me of kind of like Rat Pack, Dean Martin, or like, Frank, kind of like Sammy Davis Jr.
Sure.
That type of just like smoking jacket, with that kind of like, or Elvis maybe, like really sparkly kind of things. But, he has, they match his robes, right? He has a blue one or a red one at some point.
There's
a gold or silver one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He had one that was like more or greenish teal for the first couple of shows, and then it switched to more just straight blue.
Yeah.
And I think the one that was like goldish teal was more of like a lame fabric as opposed to sequins. And they're all, just a quick thing he could put on, and it drastically changes his appearance.
My dude raided Barry Manilow's closet and came out with a shit ton of wardrobe.
I don't know if I sent it to you or not, but I made I'll post it. I made a comparison that Barry Manilow on his last tour has a sparkly red jacket, a sparkly blue jacket, and a sparkly, like, they are spot on. And he does, there's a moment in the show where he does the crucifixion pose.
No shit.
Pretty much. And they launch pyro from the back. And it's exactly spot on to the end of right here, right now. And it's really funny to me.
Barry Manilow and his Nameless Fools.
Yes. And then there's also the ghouls, the cycle.
Absolutely. So we were making mention last episode how you can't have like too much of a change. And for the cycle before this one, the frontman drastically changed, and then the ghouls kind of carried over a similar look from Meliora to Prequel. But with this cycle, the Papa becomes a little more familiar with the look, but the ghouls drastically changed. This is the most drastic change that we've seen thus far.
And it's hard to explain what these are. It's kind of hard to explain what these masks and these costumes are. They're not as much masks as they're helmets. They're made by Bob Bassett and, Ukrainian artist, and they are beautiful leather masks. When I see this style, I think some people might know Sid Wilson from Slipknot had a mask made, a gas mask made by Bob Bassett that he wore a lot, a couple, I believe, and it's very similar to these. This mask is very much in the style of Bob Bassett. If you go through his website and look through his work, and please do, because with everything going on in Ukraine, he suffered a lot of damages in his shop, and I know that he was going through a tough time last time I looked. So if anyone can look through his stuff, and maybe if there's something you can afford, purchase something from him. He does great work, but this is very much his style. Is these kind of sculpted leather gas masks with this tubing and these kind of goggly eyes, Star Wars-esque creatures, post-apocalyptic gas mask looks. And we have that with these military kind of suits with the black epaulets, and at some point they all had capes with this kind of blue coloring going through, and these boots with the crucifixes on them. And it's a huge difference, because now we have these kind of stormtrooper-esque Star Wars, was it like Tusken Raider meets, like scuba diver, military, uniform type thing going on, which is very different than, the priest look or the devil look or, the silver devil look. It is something completely different where it's very sci-fi futuristic as opposed to something from, religious priests. All the kind of religious part of it is kind of stripped away for something much more sci-fi futuristic.
Yeah, it's very dystopian, like what literally what a military cadet would look like in this era. I've even seen people refer to it as like a bug look because of the eyes.
Bug ghouls.
Like the bug ghouls because of the goggles and everything. But I love the addition of like the horns. I like that the horns do not overtake the look. Like it's not the prominent feature, but it's more of an accent. And I actually really dig that it is an accent piece. And I think the inner workings of these masks are pretty cool. Just from what I have heard, I don't know how true this is. Maybe you could clarify. These masks had air conditioning shit put into, like, that's what the sides are supposed to be. Like, if I'm reading into it right, the sides of the mask are, for ventilation and have like miniature fans in there. Because I couldn't understand how like you could perform in this shit. That wouldn't
shock me. I haven't like in full honesty, I haven't done enough research to find out if that's the case or not on the mask. Because this era is just, there's so much to go into with the Papa masks and everything that like I hadn't had the time before we did this to fully research the ghouls in it. But I believe that's the case. I believe there's a cooling type of system, as far as I know. It makes the most sense. But yeah, they're leather too, which is strange. Like most masks from this cycle and past cycles, I should say, are, a type of resin. I just want to bring it up. Imagine how bad these must have smelled. Just imagine just sweating in a leather mask.
Yeah.
And just like how often they get to wash those. Like I feel like it's kind of a bold move to make a leather mask.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, dude.
Yeah, it's just, you think about it, right? It's like, I know that there's a reason that Copia never had the full leather suit on stage, and then they went and made leather masks to wear that were like, had no peripheral vision. They do, technically, the eyes have, it's kind of like a mesh around those bug-eyed things so they can see, but still, it's not great peripheral vision. It's really limited, but those masks out of all cycles, look the most hellish to wear. They're just helmets and just they toured in the heat outside for that amphitheater tour, and I know Tobias mentioned that people were getting heat stroke and they were all like, sick.
Yeah.
And, it's the things they do for that,
Yeah. I was at the Houston Ritual in 2023 at the Woodlands, and this is it's the end of August, early September. I think it was fucking beginning of September. And I know for a fact the heat index was near like the lower hundreds, upper 90s, like somewhere in that area, even at night.
Oh, and I can't imagine. And they're wearing these, on top of just the vest and everything with the class, they're wearing these full jackets, and these big kind of flowy pants that have these like pantaloon bottoms to them.
Pantaloon is one of my favorite words ever.
I know.
It's so great.
It's so great. But it perfectly describes these. Right. And the boots, the leather boots and everything. It's just like, oh, I can imagine how brutal it must have been.
Pantaloon, pantomime. I mean, it's just so. And the stage lights, I was going to say a while ago too, like with all that heat and the stage lights, performing under literally all of these conditions. Hats off to that band. Straight up. Hats off to that band for pulling that shit off.
Absolutely. But it's a great look. It's a ghoul look. Personally, I'm conflicted on. I'll explain why, right? I think it's a good discussion, and I'd love to hear people's opinions in the comments if you can leave it. I love these looks. I think they are phenomenal looking. Some of the best looking designs, but I do miss the kind of religious clergyman vibe that goes so well with Papa. And so while I love these from a design standpoint, I'm sometimes conflicted on how much it gives me. If I saw this, right, this look, and you didn't tell me what band this member was from, I don't know if I would immediately jump to Ghost. As when I see some of the other masks. But which is interesting because we associate them so much with Ghosts, but I don't know how much it reads to me as like Ghoul as it reads soldier in a Star Wars dystopian movie. So while I do love the design, and this is not me saying I don't love it, and I'm not unhappy that we had it because I think it looks so sick. Especially, I got to bring up the shot in Spillways where the Ghoul's looking up, at the camera. But one of the shortcomings for this design for me, just personally, is that I would have loved some type of like maybe a crucifix necklace or something, or something a little more in that thing. It's very drastically different than anything we've gotten before. And going forward with the next era, we'll talk about, next time, they kind of go more back into that kind of religious thing. So it kind of evens out. But it is kind of interesting that there is not much there that this could have been one of the Sid Wilson costumes. It's just a very cool military post-apocalyptic thing, but it works really well for the era of this, empire and, military dictatorship themed album. And it's beautiful, right? Because it works so well on stage. Everything works well, from the costumes to the ghouls to their personalities to the the mask being personalized, and each ghoul having a little bit of a different mask. Everything about it works so incredibly well, and Papa's costumes, and it's very cohesive, and it's very it sets up this modern arena rock ghost like we were talking about before. This is them built for arenas, and this is no longer just the same spooky Pope band. This is something completely different and new territory that will set the precedent for going forward.
And the cool part is this isn't an era when we change into next week's episode where we talk about the Skeletor era, which we're still in the beginning stages of it. Even though we've launched a full-scale world tour, we're still in the first year of this. We're barely even half a year in. Truly.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be more tours and, more legs and more costumes and more things. And we still haven't even seen all of that,
right,
of what they have in store. But still, there's a stark difference.
Yeah. And where we leave off with this one is we don't get a Papa that disappears, because the character of Cardinal Copia / Papa Emeritus IV at the end of Right Here, Right Now gets ascended to Frater Imperator. So now you have this character that has gone from, I don't know if I can do this, I'm not cut out for this, then goes to being the guy fronting the band that is, by all intents and purposes, in the Ghost universe, into his own vision, the greatest to have done it so far. He even still is saying that. Now he's been given the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, because his mom and his dad are now Force ghosts, for lack of a better term. Yep. And Frater is struggling with his now brother taking over the position as frontman. That is the character in question that we will be getting into on next week's episode with Papa V Perpetua.
We could talk a little bit more too then about his other outfits that he gets. Because Cardinal doesn't go away; he gets a new outfit and is seen a lot in the cycle.
Yes, and I would love to save, like you said, I would love to save that for that discussion, because before we even get the rollout for Skeletor, we still have more of Copia to talk about because of that mask, because that mask is a little different. Like, it's not much different, but it's a little different. The costuming is different, but still resembles his beginnings, which I think was a nice touch, which we'll get into. But the Papa becomes much more, like, we talked about how intricate this Papa 4 design was. This Papa kind of goes next level, and that's going to be a really cool discussion to have because of how it was rolled out and what we're seeing, and everything's still developing. So please, if you're enjoying this series, and if this is your first episode, go back and check out the front half of the Masks of the Evil Ones series and check out the other episodes, because we will be bringing all of this back around full circle. It's not like we just leave it in the past. We will be bringing a lot of these talking points back. So get caught up and come back next week. It's going to be a great time.
And as this episode, this next episode, or the one you're listening to right now, drops, Ghost will be about to be starting their U.S. Skeletor. And what a perfect time to, get ready for your ritual by listening to all these episodes and getting ready to see Ghost if you're in the United States by listening to this and leading up to our next episode that we speak about, which will be the Skeletor era. So it works perfect.
And that will be capping off this series of episodes, Masks of the Evil Ones. And after that, we will be taking a very small break, and then we will be coming back with a completely different series going forward. We've got some other content in the works, but we definitely have another entire actual series already planned out and ready to get rocking and rolling on, or get rocking, as Papa would say. So yeah, if you're liking what you hear, come back for more. There's not going to be a shortage of content. We can promise you that. And with that being said, for past, present, and future episodes of GonstFM Off Air, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. You can leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a rating and leave comments on individual episodes on Spotify. And if you're listening to this episode on our YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to the channel, clicking the bell for notifications for future episodes, leaving a like on the video, or leaving a comment down below. Any engagement helps. If you would like to come to a future GonstFM Station Head radio ritual, if you would like to buy GonstFM merchandise, or if you would like to join the group's Ghost cosplay and the official GonstFM group, GonstFam, all of this information can be found in our Linktree link in the show notes below. And so, our dearest Gonslings, that brings this week's episode to a close. Some of you we will see in Internet Land, and the rest of you we will see in Ghost cosplay or GonstFam. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, until next time, in Gonst, we Tronst. I'm Papa X.
I'm Uncle Ghoul.
And we'll catch you next time.